Okay. Hello, everyone, from Paris. I'm pleased to be teaching the DAF uh, uh, even from far away and able to continue our learning together every day, another page. We are at the bottom of Lamed Daled Amud Bet. Today's DAF is Bava Kamma Daf Lamed Hey. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. So we are again at the Mishnah at the bottom of Lamed Daled Amud Bet, and our Mishnah. We have now begun discussing. We teased today's talk by noting that there are certain situations where a person could do something, and an animal could do a very similar thing, and in certain circumstances the person will be liable for damages only if the person does it, but not if the animal. And in other circumstances where the person will be liable only if the animal does, and not if the person does it. So let's take a look and see what our Mishnah says are those circumstances. So yesh chayav al ma'aseh shoro upater al ma'aseh atzmo. There are certain situations where you can be liable for your own actions, for your ox's actions, excuse me, but not for your own actions. And pater al ma'aseh shoro v'chayav al ma'aseh atzmo, and vice versa. You can be exempt from liability for your ox's action, but you will end up being obligated with your own similar action. So, Ketzad, let's give some examples. So, Shoro, Shabiyesh Patur, Vahu Shabiyesh Chayav. If your animal embarrasses somebody, think about dog tricks that you might see in a movie or something like that can cause extreme embarrassment. That would not result in liability. But if the person does something that embarrasses somebody, that would result in liability. And similarly, not only with respect to embarrassment, but also if an ox were to knock out the tooth or an eye of a Canaanite slave, that would not result in liability. That would not result in the slave going free. Behu shesime as Eino, as Ein Abdo, v'hipil as Sheno Chayab. But of course, if the person does it, he is liable. So Shor Shahava, and then on the other hand, Shor Shahava ba'av v'imo Chayiv. If your animal were to do damage to your parent, then you would be obligated to pay for their damage. But if you do it to yourself, you are exempt. And similarly, an ox that sets fire to a stack of grain on Shabbos would be liable to pay for the damage done to that grain. And if he does it himself, he's exempt. Why in those last two circumstances is he exempt? Because in both circumstances, he is essentially obligated to give up his life. He's subject to the death penalty for either causing a wound to a parent or burning something on Shabbat. So Tani Rabbi Abahu Kamei de Rabbanan to Rabbi Yochanan. So now our Mishnah, the Gemara, cites a related brisa. So Kol Hamakalk, and Rabbi Abahu is teaching it in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Kol Hamakalkel and Peturin Chutz Mechova Mavir. That based on this, we can say that anybody who does something that's destructive on Shabbat, they're going to be exempt, except for somebody who wounds somebody or burns something. And that's based on our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah, we had wounding and burning, and those two things, even though they might not have not have any constructive component to them, yet we say that the person is going to be exempt from paying financial liability because he would have been obligated to lose his life. So we would be obligated for the death penalty. So Amar Lei, so Rabbi Yochanan responded, Po Tane Levara, don't teach, go teach us outside, meaning I don't agree with this. Chovel Umavir ain't a Mishnah. It's not. You're not supposed to say that that it's all wounds and burns, that's not what you should be teaching. Tim Selomer Mishnah, and if you want to say that there's something to teach here, Chova b'tzarach l'kalbo. It's talking about where you wounds the wound is in order to create blood for the dog to eat, to drink, or mavir b'tzarach la'afro, or when you burn something in order to get the ashes. So now we have two different views. We have Rabbi Yochanan saying that no, that when it comes to things that are destructive, all things that are destructive are going to not be exempt from punishment on Shabbat. Whereas Rabbi Abahu says that no, everything that's destructive is going to be exempt from Shabbat, except for causing wounds and burning. So those would be the two exceptions. So now to support Rabbi Abau, we cite our Mishnah. So Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, if you have an ox that set fire to a pile, Shabbat chayav. If it happens on Shabbat, the person is chayav. They're obligated to pay the damages done by their animal. But if he does it, he's not liable. Tani hu dumya deshoro. So it seems like he, meaning it's just the same kind of case as his ox. So mashoro delo kavai lay. So just as an animal doesn't have any need for ashes, so as we turn to Lamed Hey and Aleph, hunami delo kavai lay, he also must not have any need for the ashes. And yet we say that he's not liable because he is going to give up his life. So doesn't that doesn't that show that one who burns something on Shabbat for no beneficial purposes is going to be liable for the death penalty? So the answer is no. No, it does not show that. Lo. Shorodumya today, that when we say that the animal has to be similar to the situation involving a person, mahu de kavaile, just as he wants the ashes, af shorod de kavaile. Also, too, we're talking about an ox that wants the ashes. Really, the Gemara wonders. Shoro hekibishgachasla. How in the world can you find a case where there's some kind of ox who actually wants ashes? So Amarle Rav Avya. And here's what we're talking about. Bishur pikeach she'also lo neshicha begabo. That we're talking about an intelligent ox that got a bite on its back. Bekabaim lemikle the igander bekumtma. And he wanted to burn some papers and then roll in the ashes. So uminaya dinan. And how do we know that this is in fact what the ox intended to do? Kamigandar, that bekuntma. And how do we know that this is in fact the ox's intent? Because after he burns it, he then rolls around in the ashes. So we actually see that he actually did want the ashes. Now, would there ever really be an ox like that? That's a pretty intelligent ox. So, and yes, there is that case. Dahu Torah Dahabu Kirav Papa. There was like a certain ox in Rav Papa's house, Dahav Kiyavin Le Chinche, that had a toothache. The Ayel Ufaskin Linazyasa, and he went inside and he pushed off the barrel top. And he drank some beer and he felt better. And so as a result, we see that in fact there is animals can have that kind of intelligence. So Amra Banan Kameda Rapapa Mimatzis Amra Shoro Dumya Didei. Can you now that we said that the ox is going to be similar to the person, Vahakatani Shor Shabish Pater Bahu Shabish Chayev, Shor Dumya Didei, right? If we're saying that an animal that embarrasses is not liable, but a person who embarrasses is liable. But if we're supposed to say that there's cases are supposed to be similar, then how in the world does an ox impose liability like that? How does I'm sorry. So if let me back up. So that which we said, the Mishnah said that he's not liable if the animal causes the humiliation, but he is liable if he himself causes the humiliation. So how in the world could there be an ox that intends to humiliate? Because obviously that's the necessary component, or at least that's the proposal that we're understanding at the moment. So how could it be comparable to him? This kavin levayish mishkachas. How can you find a case like that? So kagon sheniskaven lahazik. No, it doesn't actually mean that the animal has to want to embarrass the person. Rather, it just means that the animal has to want to do damage. That the Amar Mar, because Mar said niskaven lahazik afal pishalo niskaven levayish. That when it comes to a person, you don't actually have to intend to embarrass the person to be liable for the damage of embarrassing, but rather, as long as you intend to do some kind of damage, well, then you'll also be liable for the embarrassment that is caused. Okay, so what have we done? We have just given a relatively long answer to the question of why it is, of whether or not Rabbi Yochanan is correct, right? We had Rabbi Yochanan says that all destructive acts are not going to be liable for the death penalty on Shabbos, and we questioned that, and we said, well, what about our Mishnah? Doesn't our Mishnah show that that there's destructive acts that are liable for the death penalty? And we said, no, in fact, we can say that all of those were not, in fact, destructive acts. And that's why they were subject to the death penalty and therefore exempt from financial liability, based on the principle of cum le b'derabamine, that only the most severe punishment should apply. So Rava, however, gives a different answer to the question that was posed on Rabbi Yochanan. And instead of focusing on the fact, on trying to show that there's certain circumstances, or making our Mishnah into a circumstance where the liability is as a result of, is as a result of a constructive act, we're going to say, no, we're not even talking about any kind of situation like that. But Rava Amar Masdisun B'Shogeg, we're talking about a completely unintentional act of lighting a fire on Shabbos, and he's still going to be exempt from paying the defendant in that case. Kedetana de Beis Chizkiah, as was taught in connection with the yeshiva of Beis Chizkiah, of Chizkiah. Because what did it say? The Tana de Beis Chizkiah, Makeh Adam umakeh behema. The pasuk says both in Vayikra Parakaf Daled pasuk Kav Aleph. It refers to both striking a person and killing him, so that the person gets killed, and that one who strikes an animal pays money damages. So we had both of those makez, but they're connected. So ma makeh behema lo chalakta ben b'shogeg ben b'mezid ben miskaven l'shein miskaven. When it comes to an animal, we're not going to distinguish between all the various kinds of situations, whether it's intentional, unintentional, whether it's inadvertent or deliberate, derech yerida, derech aliyah, whether you're going up or you're going down, which can be a relevant factor in connection with accidentally causing somebody's death and thereby having to go to the Arei Miklat, ben lepotro mamon. In all of those cases, you will be exempt from the money, because we're not going to focus on, and we're not. It doesn't make a difference what you, how you do the killing. We're not going to have you be chayiv money. Or rather, we're going to actually no. I'm sorry. In all these situations where when it comes to striking an animal, we're going to say in all those situations, none of them are going to result in an exemption. Rather, they're always going to be covered by an obligation to pay money. So afma ka'adam. So now, on the other hand, when it comes to a person, lo taklok bo ben shogeg l'meiz, we're not going to distinguish between inadvertent and deliberate. Ben miskaven l'shein miskaven, whether intentional or unintentional. Ben derech yerida derech aliyah. It doesn't make a difference whether it's going down or up. L'chayvo mamon el lepotro mamon. We're not going to make them obligated in money, but rather we're going to say that you're exempt from having to pay any penalties, even though the person might not end up being killed because maybe it was only a shogeg. So so now we are going to challenge Rava's explanation. Again, Rava's explanation shows that in fact our Mishnah said, just because our Mishnah says that the case of hitting parents or burning something on Shabbos, and both of those cases are exempt from liability for the person, but subject to liability for the animal. And we wanted to say, well, doesn't that show that we're going to say that on Shabbos, even a destructive act like causing a wound or burning something will be considered a violation of Shabbos? So the answer was no, we're not going to consider that a violation of Shabbos, but we're going to consider we can potentially put it in a shogeg category, according to Rab, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a shogeg situation, and therefore our Mishnah is not a counterproof to Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan can maintain his statement that you're always exempt from full liability on Shabbos if you have only destructive intent. So Amrle Rabban la Rava. So Rabbi said to Rava, "Mimatzis mukmas la b'shogeg." Can we really say that this Mishnah is talking about a shogeg? At the end of the Mishnah, we specifically say that you're obligated for your life. So how could that be? So Haso Haki Kamar. So Rav explains that no, this is the situation. I mean, Rava explains, excuse me. And so Kavan to Mazid Nitum Benafsho. Since if in fact this were if this were a deliberate act, he would have been punished with losing his life. The Hechi Demei Deka Boy Lafro Hashta B'Shogeg Putter. So and when would that be? That would be if he actually needed the ashes. So now that he is only b'shogeg, he's still going to be exempt from the monetary payment. And so as a result, Rava has shown us how you can read in to the words of the Mishnah his approach. Okay, so that brings us to the next Mishnah. And so and the next Mishnah outlines a variety of cases, many of which will be subject to the concept of that the burden of proof is on one attempting to collect the money. So what we call hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. So shor shahaya rodev achar shor acher. You have one ox A is A's ox is chasing B's ox, and then eventually it's found v'huzak that the animal was damaged. B's ox was damaged. Zemar shorcha hizik. And so of course B is now saying to A, your animal did the damage. B'zeomer lo chiela b'sela laka. No, my animal may not have done the damage. Rather, it may have been that your animal just rubbed against the rock in the wrong way, and that's why it seems to have scrapes on it. So in that situation, if the person wants to try and make the claim, he's going to need to bring proof. What if two animals were chasing after one animal, and of course that one animal that was being chased ends up being injured? And the two people who own the two oxen who were doing the chasing, they each blame the other, saying your ox was the one who did the damage. Your ox was the one that did the damage. So now we turn to Lamed Hayam a bit. Shneim Peturim, the two of them are exempt. So im hayu shneim shel echad shel ish echad, if both of them belong to one person, well then shneim chayavim, then those two animals are still going to be chayav, meaning that the person is going to be obligated for that liability. And the oddness of the saying of the Gemara of the Mishnah, excuse me, saying shneim chayavim. So if we take a look in Rashi, shneim chayavim mefarish b'Gemara, top line in Rashi, second Rashi. So we'll see that that's going to be explained in the Gemara. So ha'echad gadol ve'echad katan. Now we have a same kind of situation, two chasing two, and one is large and one is small. The hanizik omer gadol hizik, and I'm sorry, there's only one damaged animal in this case, and the v'amazik omer lo kiela katan hizik. So the damaged party says that it was the large animal that did the damage because he wants to be able to collect from the entire animal. Because again, we're assuming that we're talking about a short tom here, where it's only ordinarily going to pay half damages, but it's limited to the value of the entire animal itself. And so here it's the victim wants it to be the bigger animal so that he has more ability to collect, whereas the defendant wants it to be the smaller animal so that he's less likely to be fully liable. So in any event, that's case number one. Or echad tam echad muad, where you have one animal that, again, two chasing one, and one was the chasers was a tam and the other chaser was a muad. Hanizik omer muad hizik, v'amazik omer lo kiela tam hizik, and the damager says no, it was the tam that did the damage, and so as a result, I'm going to only owe you half. Hamotzi mechavero alav araya. Again, the proof rests on the one who's trying to get the money. All right. How about if there were two animals who were attacking and two animals who were the victims? So hanizakin shnayim, echa gadol ve'echa katan. We have one large, one small. Mazikin shnayim. So the damaged animals were big and small, and the damagers' animals were big and small. Hanizak omer gadol hizik es hagadol, v'katan as a katan. The big one hurt the big one, and the little one hurt the little one, because that's going to maximize the person's recovery, because there won't be any limitation on the liability, or the limitation will be appropriate. Hamazik, will be a better sized, but Hamazik Omer, the one who did damage, says no. Elakatan as a gadol, a gadol as a katan. So the person will be able to the small animal hurt the big animal, and the bigger animal hurt the small animal. And so when the small animal hurt the big animal, and the damage was worth more than the small animal itself, so then that liability will be limited to the value of the small animal. So that's the advantage to the damager, and so he's going to make that claim. So, or we can have a similar situation where there are, again, two animals that were being attacked, and echad tam echad muad, and the two attacking animals were, one was a tam and one was a muad. Hanizak omer muad hizik es a gadol, but tam his es a katan. The damaged party wants to say that the large animal was hurt by the muad animal, and the smaller animal was hurt by the tam animal. So that way, the halved damage is the smaller amount of damage. But Mazagomer, no, lo ki ella tam as a gadol, muad as a katan. The tam animal was the one that damaged the large one, and so as a result, you're only going to get half of your damages. Muad as a katan, and the muad damaged the smaller one, and so you'll get full damage for that, but it's just going to be the smaller amount. So Amr B'chia Bar Abba Zosomer. So that's so we say Hamotzi Mechavero Alav Araya. Yeah, you still have to follow. You have to in order for the defendant, in order for the plaintiff to actually collect, you're going to need to actually bring proof. Yeah, because that's not going to be enough. So Amr B'chia Bar Abba Zosomeris. Excuse me. Chalukim alav chaverav al sumchus de amar mamon hamutal b'sapek chokin. That all this Mishnah highlights a very important point, and that is that Sumchus's friends all disagree with him. Sumchus says that when you have money in doubt, that you don't say hamotzi mechavero alav araya, but rather you split it. Now, of course, it's not where I can just go up to you and say that oh, that has a lovely coat, I think that's mine. That doesn't work. You have to actually have some kind of legitimate claim associated with it. But Sumchus would say in all of these cases that you would split the money, whereas in our Mishnah, obviously, we say no. We say hamotzi mechavero of alav araya. So having noted that, so where Gemara is going to ask a question whether Sumcha specifically said this, even in the case in our Mishnah. So Amar le Rabbi Abba bar Mamel Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Sumchas afilu bari ubari. Did Sumchas say this position even when both parties are saying with a degree of certainty that their claim is correct, or does it only apply in certain situations where the plaintiff has a sense of certainty and the defendant has a sense of uncertainty? So Amar Le in Amar Sumchus Afilu Bari Bari. So Rabbi Chia says that in fact it was even said in a case of where both claimants have a degree of certainty, have say that they're certain. And how do you know that our Mishnah deals with a case of two certain claimants? To Gitani, because we have in our Mishnah, Zelmer Shorcha Hizik, Zelmer Lo, Kiala Lo. Key, and then continuing that that it's not the one who, my ox wasn't the one who did damage, rather it was a rock or something else. So that sense of certainty is reflected in this language of our Mishnah. So Maskifla Rav Papa objected. Midresha, from the fact that the Resha, the beginning of the Mishnah, Baru Bari, then Seif Nami Baru Bari. Now we're going to have a long question essentially here that's going to highlight that if in fact we're saying that the beginning of our Mishnah deals with two certain situations, then the end of our Mishnah would also be appearing to deal with two certain situations. And that doesn't seem to actually be true. So let's take a look. Because Ema Seifa, let's take a look at the end of the our Mishnah. Haya Echa Gadol Be'echa Katan, Nizak Omer Gadol Hizik, Mazik Omer Loki Ela Katan Hizik. So we have a large animal and a small animal. We're chasing the third animal. And the damaged party says the large animal did the damage, and the damager says no, it was the small animal that did the damage. Or Echad Tam Echad Muad, Nizak Omer Muad Hizik, Vamazik Omer Lokiela Tam Hizik. And again, same basic idea, but now it was a Tam and Muad. And the damaged party says it was the Muad, so he gets full damages. And the Mazik, the person who did the damaging or owns the animals that did the damaging, says no, it was the Tam who did the damage. So you have to bring proof. So Halo Maisi Raya. What is the implication? If he did not bring proof, Shakal Kida Amar Mazik, then you would at least get what the damager admits. So name it to heavy tiyuv to the Rabba Bar Natan. That seems to be a counter proof of Rabba Bar Natan. Because what did Rabba Bar Natan say? The Amar Tano Chitim Vahoda Lobis Orim Pator. That when it comes to the concept of moda b'miktsas, that if you admit partially, then you're going to have certain obligations. When it comes to if somebody claims that you owe him wheat and you say no, you would only owe barley, that is not going to create any liability for you, and you won't even actually owe the barley. So Ela Bavaru Shema. So it must be that we're talking about a Bari and Shema case, because otherwise we would be apparently conflicting with Rabba Bar Natan. And now that we're saying that the end of our Mishnah is a certainty and a perhaps case, where one side is saying perhaps and the other side is saying certainty, so then that's going to cause a problem, because we're going to have change from two certain claims in the beginning of our Mishnah. So to Ka'amar, Bari Man to Ka'amar Shema, I'm sorry, Amar Bari Man, Amar Shema Man. So now in second, before we go any further, which one of the claimants would be the one who was the certain claimant, and which one was the one who was saying that maybe he had a claim? So Ina in name the Kamar Nizak Bari Ubakamar Mazik Shema. If you were to say that the situation is where the victim is the one who was certain and the damager was saying he was uncertain, well then Akati Lema to heavy Tiyuf to Rabba Bar Natan. That would still be a refutation of Rabba Bar Natan. Ela to Kamar Nizak Shema Vakamar Mazik Bari. So it must be that the damaged party is saying, look, perhaps it was your muad animal, and the damager is saying, no, it was definitely my tam animal. Umidiseifa Nizak Shema Umazik Bari. and from the fact that the end of our Mishnah was dealing with a situation where the damaged party was uncertain and the damager was certain. So Reisha Nami Nizik Shema Mazik Bari. So our Reisha, so the beginning of the Mishnah should also be in that kind of situation. And Va'amar Sumkas Afilu Baha, and would Sumkas actually say that even in that situation where the claimant wasn't even certain about his claim, that he would in that situation require the splitting of the money to Itzrach Lashmi'inan Delo, and that would be why the Mishnah would need to tell us that Sumchas's colleagues disagree with him. Could that possibly be? Of course not. That can't possibly be, and so as a result, that makes it a question on Rav Papa, and so as a result, Rav Papa says no. Lo, safe and Nizak Shema Mazik Bari. Really, you're right. The end of our Mishnah is the damaged party is uncertain and the damager is certain. But Reisha Nizek Bari Umazik Shema. In the Reisha part of the Mishnah, it was where the damaged party is the one who is certain and the damager was the one who is uncertain. But one second, V'halo Damya Reisha L'Seifa. But then the beginning of our Mishnah and the end of our Mishnah aren't similar, because in the part of it, it refers to the claimant having the certainty, and part of it refers to the defendant having the certainty. So no, we'll say Amri Bari Vishema Vibari Chad Milsahi. We can say that actually when you have one who's certain and one who's saying perhaps, it doesn't make a difference if it switches in the middle of your Mishnah. That's going to be a consistent Mishnah. However, Bari Ubari, Shema Ubari, Trey Milininu. But if you were to switch from two Baris, two certain claims, and then talk about one claim with certainty and one claim with perhaps, that would be two different things, and we wouldn't want that to happen. And so that shows that given the fact that we don't want that to happen, so then in fact you cannot in fact prove, as Rabbi Chia was suggesting, that Sumchus would also say his rule even when in a case of certainty and certainty, because in the end our Mishnah is one of perhaps uncertainty. All right. So having taught all of that and disproved Rabbi Chia's effort to try and say that even Sumchus would even say his point when both claimants are certain, so now we're going to look back at Rabbi Bar Natan's statement in connection with chitim and soren, where one person claims wheat and the defendant says, no, I owe you barley. So Gufa, let's take a look at it. Rabbi Bar Natan says, Ta'anu chitin v'hodalo b'soren patur, that if somebody claims wheat and the defendant only admits to owing barley, so then he's not going to be liable for anything. So my kamashwan, what in fact is this actually teaching us? Because Tanina, we have a Mishnah that says Tano chitin v'hodalo b'soren patur. We specifically say that somebody who claims wheat and the other person admits only barley is going to be exempt. So that's a Mishnah that we have in Maseches Shavuos Daf Lamed Chet Amabet. So Imi Hasam, no, that Mishnah would not be a sufficient proof to Rabbi Bar Natan, because if we were to only have that Mishnah there, Haba Amina, I would have thought Pater midmei chitin v'chaya midmei seorin, that I would say that okay, yes, you're in fact Pater, but the thing that you're Pater for is the wheat. You're not Pater completely. So Kamash Malan, the Pater Lagamri, that the fact that we need to actually have Rabbi Bar Natan is telling us that in fact you have to you're completely exempt. That if in fact what you admit does not match with the claim, well then you're not even going to be liable for what you admit. So Tanan, and we have a Mishnah. Our Mishnah actually suggests a ruling on this front, because Hayuan Zik and Shnayim Echad Gadol ve'Echad Katan. If we had two damaging animals, one that was big and one that was small, Halo Maisi Raya Shakel Ka'amar Mazik. Then the implication is that if the damaged party doesn't bring proof, then he should be able to take as much as the damager admits. So am I if that's true, why should he be able to do that? Isn't this another case of wheat and barley? Because again, the person claims the the damaged party claims that your muad ox did the damage, and the damager says, no, it was not my muad ox, it was my tom ox. And so as a result, it's like somebody claiming wheat and the defendant saying, no, it's barley. The defendant doesn't owe anything. So, Roy li tova ein lo. So, actually, what we can say is that we're talking about a situation where he's eligible to potentially take the payment, but but he would not be able to actually take anything unless he brought proof. So even if the damaged party says that that it was his tom cow, the tom ox that did the damage, and the damager and the damaged party says it was the muad ox that did the damage, and the damager says no, it was my tom ox. So as a result, that is not even a partial claim, but rather a completely separate response. So as a result, he's not going to be liable for anything unless the plaintiff is able to bring some sort of proof that it was one of the animals. One second, Vatanya, we have a brisa that specifically says that you do get to collect the way the defendant admits that when you have two animals chasing two animals, and the defendant admits that the small one was chasing the big one and the big one was chasing the small one, we allow that collection to go forward. So doesn't that show again they were not being consistent with Rabba Bar Natan? So no, the toughest that we can say that that's a specific situation where somebody already went and claimed and grabbed the animals. And so in that situation where the plaintiff already grabbed the animals, so then Rabbi Natan's rule would not apply. But if in fact he had not grabbed the animals, well then Rabbi Natan's rule would apply. So Tanan, we have again another challenge of regarding Rabbi Natan, because our Mishnah also said Haya echad tam ve'echad muad, that when you have a tam and a muad, Hanizak amar muad hizik esagadol v'tam esakatan v'amazik omer lo kiela tam esagadol muad esakatan. So the damaged party is saying that the muad damaged the large and the tam damaged the small, and the damager is saying no, it was the tam that damaged the large and the muad that damaged the small. So amotzi mechaver all of a raya. So you have to bring proof. Halo maisi raya shakelt kedika amar mazik. Well, one second, the implication is that if you don't bring proof, we're going to just treat you like a regular. We're going to allow you to collect what the damaged party. I'm sorry, what the damager admits to, namely that he would be able to collect the small against the large and the large against the small. But why should he be allowed to collect anything? After all, it's wheat and barley. So the answer is, as we turn to Lamed Vav and Aleph, Roy Litol Ve'enlo. Again, he's eligible to take, but only if he brings proof. And if he doesn't bring proof, he gets nothing. So Hatanya, one second, we also have a brisa regarding this line. We specifically say that you can collect from the katan, that you specifically collect from the katan for the katan from the muad and for the gadol from the tam. So doesn't that show again that Rabbi Bar Natan, is not being followed? No, it does not show that, because the toughest, we could still say that the person is seizing the animal. And so that's the situation that we're talking about. Okay, so that all leads us to the last and to the third case of the Mishnah, where you have two people, and we're going to say that where one person owned both of the chasing oxen. So again, that's the third case in our Mishnah. But for the details of that, please stay tuned till tomorrow, as we will finish, God willing, the third chapter of Bava Kamma and start the fourth. Wishing everybody a wonderful day.